Welcome back, everyone, to Thoughts from Your Gal Pal. My name is Clara, the gal behind the thoughts, and today I have a spicy and hilarious friend of mine on the show. She's actually one of my first friends that I made as an adult, like post-college, life experiences in Atlanta. And she is somebody who I feel I am more educated after being her friend. And the moment that I knew she was something special was when I was doing my Australia letter newsletters. I put a little nugget of gold within my newsletter about how I had binge watched Bridgerton within like 48 hours. And I had put out a request to all of my readers to rank the men of Bridgerton, and Jordan's response could inspire anyone to watch that show, and she just gives really good critical thinking, and I have given it away. I've already said her name, but the guest on the show today is the one, the only, Jordan Purdy. Clapping. Wow. Welcome to the show. Okay, well, that was a dramatic pause. Oh, it is so good to have you. First, tell us who you are, what are your days looking like these days, and start with that.
Okay. So my name's Jordan. I am a 25-year-old avid romance reader. My days vary. If it's the week, which does not include Fridays because that's a weekend to me, I am very hard at work. I'm an event planner, so I work for nonprofits, branding agencies, and independently on some projects, working like galas, corporate conferences, and even some weddings. And then on the weekends, you're likely to find me in bed with a good book, like whatever I recently downloaded, or I'm hanging out with my friends drinking on a rooftop, the kinds of rooftops you're allowed to drink on, not just like a random home.
Not a random rooftop like Perks of Being a Wallflower style, but like actual rooftops, like the Ponce roof.
I like railings, safety.
I do too. Actually, have you guys, as anybody, or Jordan, I know that you're not as much of a TV person, but have you watched Only Murders in the Building yet? The show with Selena Gomez. And okay, so there is I'm not going to give anything away, but there's a plot point where somebody dies by falling off of a rooftop that probably shouldn't be a party rooftop. So that actually jogged a memory. But you mentioned that you're an avid romance novel reader, but back us up to younger Jordan. What book or series first got you into reading? When, what was the first book or series that, lit the reading fire flame?
I had to think long and hard about this. I think the answer is probably The Babysitter's Club. And that's like the first series I can actually remember having on my bookshelf, like having multiples of and reading through them. Other book series that greatly influenced me as a child were the Heartland series, which is like a horse girl book. I bet a lot of people read that.
Oh my God. I read that and it followed the same archetype. It was always about how they had to break the horse and they had to
Literally.
It was a problem case, but they persisted. They survived. Is that true? Am I misremembering?
No, that is exactly it. It was so dramatic, but I loved it. And the other series that I absolutely adored was The Tales of the Frog Princess. And looking back, this is definitely where I got my start in like romance variety type books. I remember the fourth book, which is the one where they get married in, like my hardcover book, the spine was in tatters because I read it so many times. Like, oh, love.
So tell us about the Frog Princess, because my next question was, how did you get into the romance novel genre specifically? And not to be too personal, but like what age was this, like your arc of adulthood, like hitting puberty that like tantalized the brain, or was it later in life, earlier in life? Like, can you describe that progression?
Yeah. So I definitely always like read books that had like more romance in them. I mean, my first email address was missjordancullen@gmail.com. You can still shoot me an email there. It is active.
Wait, do you still use that?
It still exists. There's like certain accounts, like maybe my Spotify account's hooked up to that. Like it's alive. Like it's
Miss Jordan Cullen or Mrs. Jordan Cullen?
Miss Jordan Cullen. I
So
was
you still
11.
wanted to keep a
It's
little single.
Yeah.
11. Wow. Okay. Okay. So Twilight was formative. Yes or no?
Twilight was definitely formative. If we're talking like real romance novels, 50 Shades of Grey was my first. I was 18 years
So
old.
I have to pause you there, and I'm not going to ever forget 50 Shades of Grey. Who could forget it? But where do you draw that line? Because for me, I would argue that that Twilight is a romance novel. Or would you not?
Really?
Because is there too much fan? I mean, I don't know. I think that the
Okay.
main theme of that is the romance between Edward and Bella.
Yes.
But you
Okay.
probably
I
have a
would say
different
that
opinion.
because there's like a distinction between young adult romance and adult romance. So, like, young adult romance, I've read all of it, like Sarah Dessen, beautiful. But like romance, we're talking like things that 17-year-olds should not be reading. They have, but they shouldn't be. And that was my first foray into that was definitely 50 Shades of Grey.
Okay. And was it I mean, I remember reading 50 Shades of Grey when I was the summer between my junior and senior year of high school. So that would have been 2012. So I would have been what, 17? Yeah, we're a similar age. I'm 2 years older than you are. I remember being in Greece with my older sister at the time. That was my first ever trip out of the country. And we went to this tiny bookstore in a Greek island, and the only book they had in English was 50 Shades of Grey, which should have told you something about the universality of that book. But like, what was it about that book that I feel like that book really? This isn't even in my question guide, but that book really popularized the genre as a whole. Like, do you agree with that, or
Yes.
like, what do you
No,
think? What do you think 50 Shades did for the genre?
I think it made it so accessible and like way less taboo. I mean, with 50 Shades, it is obviously a very taboo subject. Everyone read it, swept the nation off of its feet, but it's like most people are not engaging in any activity that's like that, but it did shed light onto it. And it did kind of bridge that gap between what people thought was romance, which is typically like that, those bodice rippers with like wavy maned men on the cover to like, oh, this is contemporary, this is modern, love that. But like, even going back before 50 Shades of Grey, and this is not my opinion, this is one that I'm like regurgitating for somebody else, but I think it's the smartest thing I've ever heard, was that Twilight like literally culturally changed the landscape so much. Without Twilight, like we wouldn't have 50 Shades of Grey. We wouldn't have novels the way that they are today in the young adults like genre or young adult genre and like in the romance genre. It is all like it all stems back to Stephanie Meyer because 50 Shades of Grey is quite literally just the
It's
same
fan
story
fiction,
rewritten. It's
right?
just not, yeah, it's fan
Yeah.
fiction, exactly. But oh, I love it.
Okay, so with that discussion, can you first, for maybe listeners who are unaware, can you describe or define smut and make any distinctions between if there's a difference between smut and romance novels? Because I would like this personally, even though we've talked about this stuff.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of gray area when it comes to romance novels between like what you're hitting as exact romance and as this smutty section. So my distinction personally is that romance novels have a good bit of plot. Smut, the plot is sex. Like that's it. So they're both good in different ways, but it's definitely like, what do you want out of the book, right? And I would categorize 50 Shades of Grey as something in that gray area, but it's like more of a romance novel because when you get
The
later
gray, would
into
you
the book,
call it the 50 Shades of Gray area?
yeah, the 50 Shades of Grey area, quite literally.
Uh,
But
do you like that sound effect?
I love the sound effects. Um,
No, I should have done this one.
I feel like
Okay.
I'm on an
It's when
episode
you
of
pause
Friends.
it that it becomes weirder. Like, it doesn't fade in and out. It's just like
Just
laughing ends.
done.
So,
Um,
50 Shades of Grey is in the gray area between smut and romance novels. And the axis is the amount that is plot driven. And would you
yes.
call So on one end you have smut. On the other end, would you call like super slow burns, or like is there a or is maybe romance novels in the middle and then there's an either end?
Yes. So I would say
Thoughts?
it goes
Okay.
like smut is one far end of it. Most romance novels kind of fall like right in the middle. And then on the other end of it is what I like to call the rom-com books. And those are the ones that are like slow burn, lots of sexual tension, lots of plot like building up to it, mainly focused on two characters. There's hardly any side characters. And like you're getting one, maybe two like spicy scenes in the entire book. And most of the
I
time
feel
they're
like I
fade
can
to
think of
black
an
anyway.
example. Um, I feel like The Wedding Date was a great rom com book. Have you read that one?
The wedding date.
It's super book club popular. It's they meet in an elevator and they fly back and forth. She's an attorney, he's a doctor, and all of the Goodreads reviews are like these character all they do is sleep together. I would say there's actually a lot of sex in that one, but it's a interracial couple, so that like adds some flavor. The author is a black woman, and the the Goodreads reviews are like all these people talk about are the what they ate and the sex they had, and it's like, well, yeah, that's what we're here for. Um,
That's it. That's also like a normal
okay,
relationship, no?
I mean, true, yeah. What are the two most important things? What are the things we need to live and reproduce as a society or as a species? Okay, so the rom com, the romance novel, the smut is the axis.
Yes. So like if like some standout authors or books on like either of those three spectrums. So if you're like going for smut, I would say like Alexa Riley, like Penny Wilder or Penelope Douglas are going to like hit it out of the park. They're all short reads. There's no plot to them. Like they're having sex every 10 pages. On the way other side of that, things like The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas or like The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, those are those slow burn, like they are kind of laugh out loud in some moments because they're so quippy. Those are the rom commies. And then right in the middle is kind of anything by Jodi Ellen Malpas or like the Bridgerton series or Colleen Hoover, except those are likely to make you cry. So, like, reader discretion is advised. But
Colleen Hoover, It Ends With Us, was the most overhyped book, in my opinion. I did not think it was good. I thought it was predictable, and I read it for a book club, and I was like, eh. But it had so many
yeah.
good reviews. It just didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, personally, for me, I'll read them because I want to know what everybody else is talking about, but it's not anything to write home to mom about.
Okay, so you just like by name characterized or classified authors into that section. Can you also are there okay, the question is, are there typical archetypes of romance novels and can you describe them? What are some common storylines that you see and what are some of your favorites that you like to read?
Yeah, I like the term technically would be like trope. That's what everyone's like, what are your favorite tropes? What do you like to follow? So this like alpha hole is a character that you used to see a lot, especially in books that were written in the 2010s. I think societally, like the landscape has changed a little bit, and now you have to write these kind of like softer men just because women are demanding like more emotion out of their romantic partners and are demanding that out of their book boyfriends as well. But like some pretty standard tropes are like enemies to lovers. Almost everybody loves that. If you don't, I'm not sure what's wrong with you. Like it's so tasty to like read an enemies to lovers, a well-written one. Friends to lovers is really popular as well. Kind of that second chance romance. Like maybe this is somebody you dated in high school and you broke up for whatever circumstance, and now you're meeting again in your 30s. The like discrepancy in either education or like wealth is also super popular. You see a lot of times like super wealthy men and poorer women, and like this kind of lavish, like, let me bestow all these gifts upon you. People love that. I think like with romance, obviously it's an escapism thing. Like we're all watching TV to escape from our daily reality. Books are the same way. People want like storylines that are bigger and grander than what you're going to get. Like no one's reading a book about someone they met on Hinge. That's real life. It's
I should
fine,
write
but
that
like
book. That no, that actually is Sally Rooney. That's normal
yeah,
people. Normal People is the most relatable dating or book about a relationship I've ever. It's dysfunctional as hell, but it is the most relatable book of dating I've ever read in my life. And that's why I think she has an audience as well, although hers is a little more like esoteric. it's cool to read Sally Rooney. It might not be cool
Yeah.
to read I think it's becoming cooler and more accepted because I honestly think that TikTok has amplified people's interest to a point where honestly we are as a society, and I think our generation is more egalitarian in what is deemed as cool, and I think we're moving away as a young generation of classifying things, although there is some issue still I think with calling things basic or chuggy because those are generally women's interests, and we demean them by saying like, oh, why are you into shopping or Real Housewives or reality TV shows? That's so basic, when really like it's just a hobby. It's just something I'm interested in, and you're classifying it as something bad. And I feel like romance novels fall into that category. However, I know I have interrupted you, but a side question I wanted to ask you is kind of, are there any people on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube that are amplifying authors in this space or who are experts that you follow? Or no? Are you on Book Talk? That's the question.
I'm definitely on Book Talk. Oh my God. It's like 90% of my feed is Book Talk. And I can't think of any like creators specifically by name that are really like amplifying like unknown authors, but I will say it is kind of like a wildfire, right? If some one creator starts talking about a book series that they like, other people will chime in. And you see this with things like Court of Thorns and Roses or From Blood and Ash, which are two like wildly popular book talk series that are both fantasy novels. Like I have read A Court of Thorns and Roses 5 or 6 years ago and loved it then, and it has had a complete resurgence. It's been picked up by Hulu, like for a TV show. You're seeing authors get a ton of exposure just because a couple people will have a wildly successful TikTok about it. Because if you set it to the right music that's trending, the algorithm is going to push it to everybody's page. It has completely changed the way that people are like publishing and promoting and buying books.
Okay, so you've mentioned a few different book names, and TBD on how I'll link those. I might just make like a Jordan's recommendation links in the description. I don't really know what I'm going to do yet, but kind of going towards or gearing this question toward beginners or people who are novices in this genre. For someone who is just looking to get into the genre, can you give a few recommendations for book series or authors that are good introductions and maybe like a little preview of the series? This might be good for me too, because I've borrowed books from you that you've recommended that you've had on hand, but I would love to have more recommendations, and probably so would the audience.
Um, yeah, I think it's important to note that with romance, like all genres is like super subjective. So I tend to lean into the darker side of romance. And most of my early reading and even like the series that are still kind of my favorites were more maybe BDSM style relationships. But there are so many good books out there nowadays. You've heard me talk about them, and I have even mentioned her previously on this episode, but I love Jodie Ellen Malpass. The This Man series was like one of the first series I read after 50 Shades. And this is about it's a book about a man who owns what we'll call a hotel, who meets an architectural like designer, interior designer. And he is that like so alpha male archetype that we were talking about earlier to a T. Like if you don't like toxic masculinity, you are not going to enjoy this book, but I gobble it up. Like every time I've read it easily 20 times. I think it's amazing. And then yes, like A Court of Thorns and Roses and From Blood and Ash are great if you just want to get into the fantasy scene. There are so many fantasy romance novels out there nowadays. These two are definitely the most accessible and kind of have really easy to follow like magic systems and world building. I think when you can get into fantasy, it gets a little more difficult to follow, like depending on the characters or depending on what sort of lore they're using. So those two are really good introductory ones. A personal favorite of like a lot of early romance readers, so I'm talking like before the age of TikTok, was the Crossfire series. This is marketed as a BDSM series, but it is, I would say their sex is like very vanilla. It's just intense. But this is like another one of those, he's super rich. She's also really wealthy. So this one's not so much like, let me shower you with gifts. They're both just really rich, doing rich people things. And it's just so fun because it's so out of the ordinary. It's like stuff you can never accomplish. But just for authors that are like great, I would say like Christina Lauren and Lauren Blakely are two authors who write tons of standalone novels or do little duets that are really like fun and easy to read. V. Keeland is also really great. Hers are a little more smutty than Lauren Blakely or Christina Lauren. And then if you want to go into the darker side, I would say like Pepper Winters is super dark. But R.K. Lily is a good, like, also BDSM, and all of her books are kind of in this same, like, universe. So you'll see characters, like, pop up again in other places.
Wow. I asked that question knowing you would have that kind of response. I just knew you would hit us with the recommendations. Now, I want to just, if that question was a globe, I want to turn it by 90 degrees. So you and I, straight women, we love our straight men. Do you think that a romance novel should be required reading, like summer reading in high school? Do you think it should be required reading for straight men trying to date? And what do you think straight men stand to learn from a well-honed romance novel? Because I will just give a little anecdote. I had a few guy friends over to my apartment, and I had I have my books displayed under my TV in rainbow order, because if you know me, that's not
Best
surprising.
way.
And I will tell you this. It's not that I just have a good number of guy friends. So they were over for dinner and they were like, "What is this?" And they kind of chuckled and laughed. They're interested. They're intrigued. I feel like they just need a little, they don't want to be, and they've said it as much. They don't want to be caught on the train reading a romance novel. I'm like, well, there's a thing called a Kindle, homie. But I feel like there's the interest is there. Like they're curious. They want to put their hand in the cookie jar. What are your thoughts on it? What do you think?
I think every straight man could definitely learn like good sex advice from a romance novel, right? Like there are hundreds of things that I would never even think to try that I read about in a romance novel. And I should have been keeping a list for all of these years that I've been reading, but they just exist somewhere back in the recesses of my mind. But I mean, I'm probably the last person who should be answering this question seriously because I am like, I've had more book boyfriends than I've had real kisses. So I don't know that I will have a great answer on this, but like every day I read these stories about men who go above and beyond for the women that they're with, whether that's like in the bedroom or out of the bedroom, just like this protectiveness, this like lush, let me just shower you with affection. And it can be as simple as like they're cooking dinner together and it's just the way that they interact, the intimacy that's there. Like, I don't see my friends, and I've not really experienced that in relationships. Like, it doesn't exist outside of these pages. And men, like, there are like blots of ink on pages that are making your women blush harder than you have ever made them blush. So like why would you not pick up a book and get some ideas? Like in the bedroom, out of the bedroom, there's so much to them. It's so fun. And like I think some women are scared to say what they want because they don't want to be needy, or they don't like they feel embarrassment about having to really say, "Oh, I want you to do this to me," or like "I want you to react this way when we're on the street and somebody looks at me." But it's like maybe they don't even know how to say it because they don't know that they want it, but they saw it in a book one time and it made them think twice? So yeah.
I think
Yeah, men
there
should
are
be.
some important words that you use there that I want to pull out and that you've used today. Lush, escapism, like gobble it up. Like I feel like we have such a fervor as women, and this spans all ages. Like as women who I mean, I really just can't speak to the gay or bi perspective, but in straight relationships, we crave that affection and that attention and that sensitivity, not necessarily in like a, oh babe, how are you doing, but there's that strength, the strength and sensitivity duality. And I feel like, you know how there are like, if you, let's say you have a middle schooler going through puberty and you don't know quite the right words to use, so you write a book, or you don't write a book, you might give them a book, and sometimes it's easier to refer to something that's already been written. I feel like the same could be said for women in who are maybe unsatisfied or feeling a little bit blasé in their existing relationship. It would be a great point to be like, hey babe, I've earmarked this chapter, like just give it a read over. It could be an interesting it could be an interesting experience, to say the very least. I don't want to advocate anybody doing anything in their relationship they're not comfortable with, but just a thought. I think that was a great answer.
Thank you.
So it's very clear from this conversation that you are an avid reader. Just for the audience's amazement, can you please share how many books you read in 2021?
Yes, I did go consult my Goodreads for this, but I read
Yes.
155 books. That's
Woo!
155 in
155.
2021.
Wow.
That
That's
was a
amazing.
lot. Yeah, I read
I think I read
127 in
13.
2020. 13?
I sucked last year. So this is another conversation that I feel like you and I have had, like when we got drinks for Christmas birthday when I was in Atlanta. Like I really leaned to the side of like, I want to read books that are like challenging to me in 2021. And I was on a road trip, and I mean, my life was chaos. But for example, I read this book called Midnight in Chernobyl because I am fascinated by Russia. And it was a slog. It was 400 pages. It was basically like reading a textbook. It was like it was on top of that Russian names that I had to remember and refer back to. But I was so proud when I did it, but that took me 3 months to read because it was truly like reading a history book, like a history textbook. Yeah. And I think you and I have had this discussion about like where do we see the role in reading? And sometimes I think we as readers feel bad about indulging in books that are escapist or silly or whatever kind of negative adjective you want to put with that book. So this year I'm trying to lean into just reading whatever the hell I want. And I also am of the mindset, which I'd be interested to hear what your take on this is. I have several books going at the same time because I've found that if I'm in the mood for something easy, I want to have a book and a story that's going. But if I'm in the mood for something a little bit more challenging, or I need to go to sleep, so I don't want to read something that's going to keep me up all night, I'll read something that's more nonfiction, something that makes me think. And I find that makes me read more because when I have the habit of reading every night, I have an option to pick from, rather than maybe if I'm at a tough point in a book, then it sits there for 4 days and I don't pick it up. What do you do?
Yeah, I will say I typically have 3 or 4 books going at all times. So, like romance novels, I do fly through pretty quickly. So, those are just like on constant rotation. I usually have something that's like more like classically good literature. So think like Secret Life of Addie LaRue or Circe or like My Year of Rest and Relaxation, like something that's like a little more serious, but is still kind of popular because I do want to be able to talk to my other friends who read like the books. I want to be part of the book club. And then I'll have something that's kind of like self-helpy. I don't like using that term for books, but like that kind of like, oh, this is an empowering book. Like this is how to manage your money better, how to
business,
like approach your career.
confidence, educational. I would say educational.
Yes. Something educational, and then like something else random. So that's usually like a fantasy, something that I have on the back burner. Sometimes I just get like, I don't want to be too immersed in that world, and they're usually really long. So I will sometimes just kind of like shelve those and read chapters of them when I feel like reading chapters of them.
I am a big fan of like being a member of your local library. One, because I live in a city, so I can walk to mine, but there are definitely some access for ebooks. So if you have a Kindle or something else, then you are able to rent books through that. Thrift books or cheap books. Have you heard of this, Jordan? My friend
Hmm.
Kendra, like, that's a good way to buy books on the cheap as well. And I'm just gonna advocate if you can shop at a local bookstore over a Amazon, that would be amazing. Um,
Yeah.
I know of one in for you Chicago listeners, one right around the corner for me is Unabridged bookstore. They're an amazing local bookstore that if they do not have a copy of something, they will order it for you and you can buy it from them. But it's just a good way to
Ooh.
support. And they have unbelievable employees who recommend really good gifts and stuff. Um, okay, so you've read a lot of books. You're reading multiple books at a time. How do you prioritize reading in the TikTok era? Because I feel like when people hear, I mean, I read a lot, but you read like next level. What are some, like, if somebody were to come to you and be like, Jordan, I want to be more like you, I want to read more books, what are some actionable things that you could tell people to do to prioritize it more? Or if that's what they want, to make reading more a part of their lives.
Yeah, I think, well, for me, you mentioned earlier, I don't really watch TV all that much and I don't watch movies. It's just not like that entertaining to me. I'd much rather pick up a book. So it is definitely like, how are you going to prioritize your free time? Because we're all working jobs now. You have like people you have to see. So it is definitely just a management of your free time sort of thing. I read most of my books on my phone. I won't lie. I download a lot of books through the iBooks app. I also have a Kindle Unlimited and I have an Audible subscription, which I don't really want to support Jeff Bezos, but it is the best way to get like cheap, accessible books. And it is what it is, you know? And I know you can do it through the library app, so maybe that should be one of
It's
my
kind of
2022
annoying.
resolutions.
I will
Yeah.
say,
'Cause
like,
you have
you
to
have to have,
waiting list.
it's a waiting list. Yeah, but I realize that I'm that person that will do things more inefficiently just for just because I believe in a cause. Like I literally haven't bought anything on Amazon in months unless I can't find it in a like I will, even though Target and Walmart are huge companies too. I'm like I will ship it to store. I don't know. I think I need to chill out a little bit, but the
I think that's
anti-capitalist
fair.
Instagram is like making me psychotic. I don't know. Okay, so managing your free time. We've talked about reading several books at once so you stay interested. Anything else you'd
Yeah.
like to add?
And then I just, because I am on my phone so much while I'm reading, it is easy for me to kind of like slip back and forth in between TikTok and a phone. I mean, at this point, other social media, like, it just doesn't really do it for me. Instagram's fine. Twitter, I have too much anxiety on, so I just don't get on it anymore. So it is like books and TikTok are competing for my time. And I have a pretty healthy split between the two. I'll like read 2 or 3 chapters of a book and then switch over to TikTok for 10 or 15 minutes and go back to the book. So I think it is just kind of a getting into the habit of reading every day and like intentionally wanting to read. And I will say Goodreads, don't super want to support them because it's another Jeff Bezos like,
I do like
but
Goodreads.
yeah, I
Apparently,
love Goodreads.
I saw a
It's not
TikTok. I
good.
think my older
Like
sister sent it to
Storygraph.
me. It was like, yeah, it makes graphs of what genres you read, and it's not an Amazon product.
Yeah,
You would think that
it's
I'm like in a super PAC against Amazon because even in my essays I mentioned I fucking hate Jeff Bezos, but like he's a horrible person, so I will shout that from the
horrible.
rooftops. And they don't pay their employees enough. And like, did you see what happened? Okay, we don't. This isn't a political show. We won't get into it. But I just can't. I just can't stand back as a up and coming content creator and not use my voice for this. I'm also the person who got sucked into donating to the ACLU today. So like, you have to remember who your author is here, who your
Yeah.
podcaster is here. I have a big heart for social issues. But yeah, Goodreads is a good way to stay social. And you know how you have like Instagram friends people who you don't ever see in real life, but maybe they were distant friends of friends or like friends from a previous time in your life, and you like always comment on each other's stuff. Do you have any of those?
Yeah.
I have like Goodreads friends, like who I do not talk to in any other ways that we like each other's updates on reading, which I find really
Listen,
silly, but
I'm not going to
sweet
be
and
that
wholesome
girl.
at the same time.
No, okay, see, I want this so bad. And I'm about to be like, but I've been on Goodreads for years, like probably 6 or 7 years, right? And everybody else has
Wow.
joined in the last 2 or 3 years because they like got into
They
reading. I was on Goodreads
have.
before it was owned by Amazon. Like I love
Wow.
this. I've been tracking my books for years and years. I have like 1,200 books shelved. And it makes me upset because nobody comments on my stuff. Nobody talks to me on Goodreads. I'm like, come on, guys, this is a social platform. Nobody wants to be
Well,
social
hold
with
please. I
me.
will allow you to promote yourself after this next question. So if you want,
Okay.
your Goodreads is not your full name. So I thought you were maybe trying to like keep it low. So that's, I feel like I would be more active in supporting your stuff if I knew that you wanted it to be supported. Does that make sense? I
Okay.
felt like you were trying to go on incognito mode on Goodreads. I'll be honest.
Yeah, okay. I will cover that. I will cover that in a few minutes.
Okay. So just as we wrap up, speaking of Goodreads, after I read A Perfect Chaos, your pick, was it Perfect Chaos or no,
Hmm.
it might have been One to Watch, which was
Okay.
way more rom-commy than anything else.
Yeah.
I would recommend One to Watch. I like reality TV. That's something that in my year 26 I have learned to like, as I talked about TikTok hobbies becoming like more acceptable. I like reality TV, and I don't know why I ever was like, why don't I like everybody likes reality, not everybody, but I like reality TV. I have gotten so into Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. I watch it when it comes out on. Oh my gosh! I just thought of my next episode. I know who I'm interviewing next. We're going to talk about Real Housewives. Um, I know that there's already a Real Housewives like dedicated podcast, but I want to talk about my perspective because that's my fucking podcast. Anyway, so I was after reading One to Watch, which is a book that you lent me. I got into like the romance. Have you ever gotten on the Goodreads like tunnel where you like see a comment and then you like refer and you just go deeper and deeper and deeper? I eventually ended up on I Married a Lizard Man, which is a subgenre of like alien marriage, like interspecies sex. Are there any some wild and out zany subgenres of romance that you would like to highlight or maybe just throw out there to get people to laugh?
Like, I would just say, let's put it this way. If you can think of a kink, and I'm using that term very lightly to describe anything that is outside the norm, like the norm.
Missionary vanilla sex. Okay.
Yeah. Somebody has written a story about it, and you can probably find it on Kindle Unlimited. Like, they'd
Okay.
say to not judge a book by its cover, but if it looks like it was made by a ninth grader in paint during their free hour, like it is going to be a strange book. I like I'm not saying
I
it's
Married a
bad.
Lizard
I'm
Man. I have to
Yeah.
when if I do a video feed of this, I'll have to link the cover on here because it is fucking ridiculous. But it actually looks like they had a budget to like do a special effects illustrator on there because it's pretty good.
Oh, some of them are really, really bad. I will say like with Am or like with Kindle Unlimited, you are getting books that are just so strange. This is where I find most of the ones that are like crazy, but if you can think of a creature, like I'm talking gargoyles, wolves, blue alien barbarians, like you name it, somebody has written a book about that creature. I recently read one that was about a cupid and three, like, God knows what. I literally can't remember what they were because I don't think they were real, but she mated with three of them at the same time. And I loved the hell out of this book. It was so strange. But, like, you can definitely get crazy with the characters. And on the flip side, there's just like so many like subgenres of the dark romance that I'm
Mm.
so
I was
fond
also
of. Like,
thinking like I would be into historical romance, like like period piece times. And I don't we
yes.
haven't really talked about that because I don't think that's your area, but I feel like as a lover of history, like I sometimes I know that you went to UGA, I went to Georgia Tech. Like I sometimes feel like I was slighted. Not really. I'm not slighted in any way. I'm the most privileged person I know. However, I didn't really have like a classical education. Like I didn't read the books that you read like in a boarding school situation or like you know a classics. And I'm not saying that romance novels should be dubbed as classics. Twilight should be. That like changed a generation. But I feel like it has been one of my personal goals to read books on history like as part of my own education because I think it's important for us to like know about history, know about the world. And much to my chagrin as a young person and as a child, but much of my to my delight now is my dad is an engineer by trade, but is a huge American history buff. And like when I was reading Midnight in Chernobyl, I asked my parents who are in their 60s now, Actually, my mom isn't. If you listen to this, Mom, sorry. Um, you know, what was happening during this time? What do you remember? Like, anyway, I'm a big lover of history. That was a huge tangent, but I feel like I would love like a good like pioneer like romance like on the Western Trail. Like I would fuck with that. Okay, so let's wrap up. Jordan Purdy, where can people find you? What do you want to promote? Like, do you want to share any final thoughts, places where people can find you if they want to become your friend, if they want to seek advice, or if they want to comment on your Goodreads?
Okay, if you want to find me on Goodreads, I don't even know how to tell people to do that. All I know is that my username is Joe instead of Jordan. And I'll say
Well,
this
that's your
much.
name. Hold on, we'll do this live. I'll look you up while you're
Okay.
talking. So divert to something else, and then we'll circle back.
So, like, I feel when I first started my romance journey, I was so ashamed to admit that I read romance. I would talk to my close friends about it, and I wouldn't really say anything to anybody. And that's why when I created this Goodreads account, it was just Joe. There was no picture of me. I didn't add anyone on it. I was just tracking books for the sake of tracking them so I wouldn't reread the same thing 100 times. And like now, look at me. Like I'm getting interviewed for a podcast about romance novels. I'm like on
It's
TikTok.
only
I talk about the
episode 2,
books
I
that I
have to
read.
say.
I know,
So
but
there
still,
might
it
not be too
counts.
many readers. I'll let you know what the metrics are. I'm tracking them. Yeah, you're just
Okay.
Joe. There's no username associated with this. I will say you are looking absolutely darling in a white. You're reading in your profile picture. If people want to find, you have a fire middle part. You're reading in a white sleeveless dress with black polka dots, and you have a rainbow bookshelf behind you. And
Yes.
it's
I
Joe.
just
You have a
Joe.
lot.
I
Yeah,
don't
you have put in 841 ratings. Your average rating is 3.88, and you've given only 19 reviews. That's super surprising.
I
And you
know I
are
don't like
currently
to review.
reading 6 books, according to Goodreads. I'm reading 3. Love in the
Yeah,
Time of
sometimes
Cholera.
I
You've been
DNF.
reading that since April 2020. How's that going? Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. I Owe You One. All the Lies. Ice Planet Honeymoon. Rahosh, and Liz. That is Ice Planet Barbarians number 2.5. Really, we're doing decimal places. And The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Those are all the books you're reading right now. I really just
Yeah,
exposed you there, so apologies, but
you did. I love that. But yeah, I mean, I would say like TikTok is like a great platform for reading, for learning, and you can just it's like a really good community. If you want to get involved, if you want to learn more about it, like TikTok is such a fun place to go. I think I'm flirty Susan. I don't know.
you
Maybe you
are
should just
flirty,
link it.
Susan. I actually have a lot of Oh, well, currently I'm locked out of my TikTok account. Not because I've done
No.
anything bad, but because I went on my writing retreat this past weekend and I deleted all my social media apps to like stay focused. And for some reason, this happened to me too. This is my second account I've been locked out of because the first one was, I think, associated with my Australian phone number, and then I don't have access to it. So when I deleted the app and tried to log back on, I couldn't get access. And then once again, didn't have either my email or my phone number. So I had to email TikTok support to say, can I have access to this? I'll let you know if I get anything. But I was going to say, I feel like if the 80-20 rule, like I send you 80% of the things and you respond 20% of the time on my TikTok DMs. Not that I don't have any like I don't have any hard feelings toward you. I just want to let you know that like I'm observing that about our communication on TikTok.
I never send anybody any TikToks. That sounds crazy, but like all of mine are books. Maybe I should start sending you some of the books that I'm like, oh, I read this one. This girl's review is good. I just like uh, my TikTok feed, and I think everybody's is like this. It's so what you make it. And so mine is just not, it doesn't really apply to anybody else. Everybody who's ever seen like a Twilight TikTok will send that to me, and I love it. I enjoy them. I love getting DMs. I'm just never going to send you one. That's just like my personality. But
You know
I
what? It's
will
all about
say,
boundaries. A really quick thing I will note for the readers. If you go on the desktop web browser of Goodreads and you go into your account settings, there is a place where you can create a profile URL where you like determine your username. So if you are wanting to share that with friends, that could be a good option. But you don't have to do that right now. I just wanted to let you know.
I will have to do that so that way I can finally start telling people how to follow me on Goodreads.
Also, I see here that I joined Goodreads in 2016. So, I mean, we're going on 6 years now. I'm doing pretty good.
Oh,
I'm sure you're even below. So,
I love that.
Flirty, Susan is your TikTok. Joe is your Goodreads profile. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I'll just say if anybody's going to give you shit for reading a romance novel, they're probably the kind of person who will say their favorite novel is Lord of the Flies. And no shame to
I've
that
never
book
read that.
because it is good. You never read it?
No, the classical education. It's been missing. No,
Like,
I mean, I
not
don't
even
think
in
that
high school? I mean, I feel like
no.
if you had to read a book for your English class in
The
10th
Glass
grade,
Castle. The Glass Castle.
oh,
I
did you
read
read
that in
Fahrenheit
AP Lang.
451?
No.
The Great Gatsby?
Yes.
Okay.
We had I don't know how yours worked, but in 10th grade we did British lit. So I read like all of like Macbeth and Shakespeare. And I remember my teacher was like the baseball coach, and he was like, we called him the Silver Fox because this was like, I was 15, the Silver Fox because he was hot and had gray hair, like a full head of gray hair and a beard. He was the baseball coach. And he was like obsessed. He would just like read us Shakespeare and like never tested us on anything. So it was great.
That sounds like an
Sometimes I
amazing
think back
class.
to my school experience and I'm like, you got a pension? You know what I mean? Not that he did a great job as a teacher. I'm just thinking of other things. Um, well, everybody, thanks for joining into the podcast today. This is Thoughts from Your Gal Pal. I'm going to get some music going.